By the mid-1970s, the Partridge Family had become a television sensation, with millions tuning in each week to watch America's favorite musical family. Yet while the show seemed perfect on screen, Shirley Jones was quietly facing a very different reality. Scripts that once highlighted the entire cast began to focus almost entirely on David Cassidy, leaving the rest of the ensemble, including Shirley herself, sidelined. Behind the laughter and catchy songs, tensions were rising, and the atmosphere on set was shifting in ways she could no longer ignore. For decades, Shirley stayed silent, letting fans believe she simply moved on to new opportunities. Now, at 91, she is finally revealing the truth about why she walked away from one of television's most beloved shows, and it is not what people might expect. When The Partridge Family premiered in September 1970, no one could have predicted its rapid rise into a cultural phenomenon. Its bright, feel-good stories, catchy songs, and vibrant, almost dreamlike aesthetic made it a staple in living rooms across America. Families gathered each week to watch the widowed Shirley Partridge, played by Shirley Jones, guide her 5 children through life's ups and downs while performing together as a traveling musical group. The role was a natural fit for Shirley, who brought warmth, elegance, and credibility to the part, backed by her acting and singing experience and an Academy Award. The early days on set felt magical. There was a real sense of camaraderie among the cast, from the youngest members like Susan Dey and Danny Bonaduce to the breakout teen idol David Cassidy. They weren't just playing a family, they genuinely felt like one. Laughter filled the soundstage between takes, and even long rehearsal hours for musical numbers felt rewarding. The producers seemed committed to creating something wholesome yet entertaining, and Shirley felt she had found a role that matched both her personal values and professional talents. The music performed on and off screen became a phenomenon in its own right. Songs like I Think I Love You topped charts worldwide, and the cast transformed from actors into unexpected pop stars. Concert tours, thousands of fan letters, and constant media appearances made the show more than a job. It was a cultural wave sweeping them all along. Shirley took pride in portraying a single mother leading her children with love and resilience, a positive representation rarely seen on television at the time. Those early years offered what seemed like the ideal balance between art and enjoyment. The workload was heavy, but it was matched by the joy of seeing fans connect with the show's heart. She loved watching the younger cast members grow both in their roles and in real life, cherishing the energy they brought to every scene. The creative team appeared open to collaboration, and scripts reflected a genuine ensemble approach, giving every character their moment to shine. But success has a way of changing dynamics behind the scenes. As ratings soared and certain cast members became household names, subtle shifts began to emerge. Shirley noticed small changes in the scripts, the focus of storylines, and even the way the cast interacted off-camera. At first, these changes felt like the natural evolution of a hit series, but they soon became warning signs of a much bigger shift, one that would make Shirley question her place in the show she had helped make iconic. By the second season, the tone on set had started to change in ways that were hard to ignore. What had once been an equal celebration of every character was beginning to tip heavily in one direction. The scripts, which had previously given each family member small arcs, now focused increasingly on David Cassidy's character, Keith Partridge. For the network, it made perfect business sense. David had become a teen idol almost overnight, gracing magazine covers, selling out concert venues, and pulling in ratings that rivaled the biggest shows on television. But for Shirley, the shift felt like the start of an imbalance eating away at the heart of the show. It was not jealousy. Shirley adored David and was immensely proud of his success, often defending him against the pressures of sudden stardom, knowing how brutal the entertainment industry could be. But she could not ignore that the family dynamic, the soul of the series, was being replaced by a one-man spotlight. Scenes that once explored the mother's perspective or showcased the younger kids were being trimmed or cut entirely. Storylines became predictable, revolving around Keith's romantic misadventures or his rise as a pop sensation. The deeper, more meaningful family themes were fading. Behind the scenes, the production schedule grew grueling. Between filming the series, recording albums, and accommodating David's concert tours, the pace was relentless. Shirley noticed the toll it took on everyone, especially David, who was juggling his role as both a fictional and real-life teen idol. While producers pushed harder to capitalize on his popularity, Shirley worried about burnout, both for him and for the integrity of the series itself. The mood on set reflected the shift. The once light-hearted atmosphere was now tinged with tension. Younger cast members felt overshadowed, unsure of their place in the evolving storylines. Crew members quietly noted the change in tone, and Shirley began hearing murmurs of frustration. She tried to keep the peace, remaining the steady, motherly figure she had always been, but deep down she could feel that the family they had built, both on and off screen, was slowly fracturing. Still, Shirley hoped that with the right conversations, the balance could be restored. She believed in the show's original vision and wanted to fight for it. But the network had discovered the gold mine of David Cassidy's fame, and once television executives smell profit, reversing course is rarely an option. What Shirley didn't realize at the time was that the imbalance she noticed was only the beginning. The changes were about to accelerate, pushing her patience and loyalty to the limit. By the fourth season in 1974, Shirley could no longer ignore the growing cracks in the show's foundation. The scripts, once rich with heart and humor, had become formulaic. Episodes that once balanced the voices of the entire Partridge family now centered almost exclusively on Keith, his charm, his troubles, or his latest love interest. Shirley's role had been reduced to delivering brief lines of motherly advice before stepping aside to make room for yet another storyline, tailored to David Cassidy's appeal for an actress of her caliber with decades of experience. The creative limitations were both frustrating and disheartening. Worse, the lighthearted family atmosphere behind the scenes had all but disappeared. The pressure to maintain ratings and feed the David Cassidy phenomenon had turned the set into a place where tension simmered just below the surface. Younger cast members, particularly Susan Dey and Danny Bonaduce, were beginning to feel invisible. Scripts that could have deepened their characters were either watered down or scrapped entirely. Conversations that once revolved around creative ideas now centered on merchandising opportunities and fan demographics. Shirley also began to notice the toll it was taking on David himself. His grueling schedule left him physically and emotionally drained. Between filming the show, recording albums, and performing live concerts, he was running on fumes. Fiercely protective of her stepson, Shirley worried about what the industry was doing to him. Yet, any attempt to slow the pace was met with resistance from producers and network executives, unwilling to let their golden goose rest. Privately, Shirley began to question what she was really staying for. The work no longer felt fulfilling, and the creative spark that had drawn her to the series had been replaced by a rigid formula. Even the music, once fresh and exciting, was starting to feel repetitive. She would come home from long filming days with a heaviness she had never experienced in her career, a sense that the joy had been drained from something she once loved deeply. The breaking point came during a script meeting late in the season. Shirley raised concerns about the show's direction, suggesting ways to reintroduce the ensemble feel and give other characters meaningful arcs. Her suggestions were politely dismissed, with the implication that the formula was working and did not need fixing. In that moment, Shirley realized that the heart of the Partridge family, the thing that made it special, was no longer the priority. The network had made its choice, and now she would have to make hers. Leaving would not be easy. It meant stepping away from a steady paycheck, millions of adoring fans, and a show that had become part of television history. But Shirley knew that staying would mean sacrificing her own creative integrity, and that was a price she was no longer willing to pay. She did not anticipate how her departure would intertwine with David Cassidy's growing disillusionment, setting the stage for the end of an era. While Shirley faced her own frustrations, David Cassidy's personal battles were becoming harder to hide. To millions of fans, he was the ultimate teen idol, selling out stadiums, topping the charts, and appearing on magazine covers around the world. But behind the glittering image, David was trapped in a grueling cycle with no room for rest, privacy, or a normal life. Days were spent filming The Partridge Family, while nights and weekends were consumed by concert tours. Whatever time remained was filled with photo shoots, press interviews, and endless fan commitments. Having weathered the highs and lows of Hollywood herself, Shirley could see the signs of burnout. There were days he arrived on set visibly drained, running on little more than coffee and adrenaline, yet still expected to bring the same charm and energy that had made him famous. When the cameras stopped, the demands continued. No downtime, no chance to catch his breath. It was not just physical exhaustion. David felt trapped in Keith Partridge's shadow, his real self hidden behind a carefully crafted image. Fans adored the wholesome, easygoing persona they saw on television, but David longed for more challenging, mature roles. The industry that had built his fame was determined to keep him in the mold that guaranteed ratings and record sales. Shirley watched with growing concern. She admired his ability to keep showing up despite the pressure, but she also knew he was being pushed beyond his limits. Her efforts to shield him from the more exploitative aspects of the business were no match for the machine driving his career. The strain began to bleed into the atmosphere on set, making the once lively environment increasingly tense. The once light-hearted environment grew heavier as David's fatigue. Occasional irritability and resentment toward the show's creative constraints became more visible. For Shirley, it was clear they were both fighting parallel battles. She for creative fulfillment, he for personal freedom. This unspoken bond deepened her resolve. She could not watch someone she cared about be worn down without questioning her own place in the show. What neither of them realized was that their shared discontent was setting the stage for major change. The network's grip was strong, but cracks were forming, and when those cracks gave way, the impact would be felt by everyone involved. By the middle of the fourth season, Shirley knew she had reached her limit. The show she had once been proud to call home had shifted from a warm ensemble story to a vehicle almost entirely centered on David Cassidy's popularity. While she respected his talent and understood the business logic, she could not ignore how much the focus had drained the heart from the series and pushed her character into the background. Episodes went by where she had little more than a few brief lines, and for an actress who had built her career on layered, meaningful performances, it was both frustrating and disheartening. Her choice to leave was not solely about her own role. Shirley could see the exhaustion weighing on David, who was quietly expressing his own desire to step away from the pressures of being a teen idol. In their private conversations, there was a shared understanding. Both were ready for something different. With her contract ending, Shirley made the deliberate decision not to renew. It was not a dramatic walkout, but a quiet stand for her self-respect and creative integrity. The network tried to tempt her with promises of more balanced scripts and bigger moments, but she had been in the industry long enough to recognize empty reassurances. The show's formula was locked in, and she had no interest in watching the same cycle repeat. When her decision became known, reactions on set were mixed. Some were disappointed, while others understood completely. For Shirley, it was bittersweet. She cared deeply for her castmates, especially the younger actors she had watched grow up. But she also knew that staying too long risked eroding not only her passion for acting but also the respect she had for herself as an artist. What she could not have predicted was that her exit would also influence David's. Soon after, he too would decide it was time to move on. And together, their departures would mark the beginning of the end for the Partridge family. When Shirley's decision to leave became official, it was as if the air shifted on set. For 4 seasons, she had been the glue holding the Partridge family together, both on and off screen. Her departure was not tabloid drama, but those who worked closely with her understood what it meant. The soul of the show was leaving. Not long after, David Cassidy made it clear he too was ready to move on. Losing its maternal anchor and breakout star was a blow the series could not recover from. The announcement was handled quietly, but the ripple effect was immediate. Fans had grown deeply attached to Shirley's warm, grounding presence and David's youthful energy. Without them, the Partridge family had lost its identity. Executives considered continuing with replacements or shifting the format, but even they understood that the magic of the show was tied directly to the chemistry of its original cast. By the end of the 4th season, the decision was made. There would be no 5th. In the years that followed, Shirley looked back on her time with the show with mixed emotions. She remained proud of what they had created in those early seasons. The joy, the music, the sense of family that resonated with millions of viewers. She valued the relationships she had built, many of which endured long after the cameras stopped rolling, but she never regretted walking away. The choice had preserved her love for performing and allowed her to move on to roles that challenged her in new ways. David's own departure mirrored her reasoning in many ways. He had grown weary of being locked into the image of Keith Partridge and wanted to explore new creative directions. Like Shirley, he carried fond memories of the show, but also a clear understanding of why it could not last. Fame had been both a gift and a cage, and leaving the Partridge Family was his way of reclaiming his freedom. Even decades later, fans still approached Shirley with heartfelt gratitude for the role she played in their lives. She understood the nostalgia because she felt it too. But she also knew that the magic they remembered was tied to a very specific moment in time. Trying to force it to last longer would have only diluted it. By leaving when she did, she ensured the Partridge Family would be remembered in its brightest light rather than through a slow, drawn-out decline. Now at 91, Shirley speaks about her decision with calm certainty. Time has only reinforced what she felt then, that knowing when to walk away is just as important as knowing when to say yes. For her, the end of the Partridge Family was not a loss. It was a turning point, marking the close of one chapter and the start of another, leaving behind a legacy that half a century later still makes people smile. When Shirley Jones stepped away from the Partridge Family, she did not retreat from the spotlight. She simply redirected it. Free from the rigid schedule of a weekly sitcom, she began taking on projects that reignited her passion for acting. She returned to her theatrical roots, performing in stage productions that allowed her to showcase her powerful singing voice and dramatic range. She also began accepting more diverse film and television roles, determined not to be defined solely by her years as America's television mom. Shirley's post-Partridge career proved just how versatile she was. She appeared in dramas, comedies, and musicals, bringing the same level of dedication to each role that had earned her an Academy Award years. Before audiences who had grown up watching her on the colorful Partridge set were often surprised to see her take on edgier or more complex parts. But Shirley embraced the chance to show new sides of herself as a performer. Her personal life also flourished in the years that followed. She continued to be a devoted mother and stepmother, maintaining a close relationship with David Cassidy even after their time on the show ended. Their bond, strengthened by the unique pressures they had shared, lasted through the highs and lows of both their lives. Shirley also became an in-demand guest on talk shows and nostalgic television specials, often reflecting on her career with warmth and humor, even when discussing the challenges she faced. As the decades passed, the Partridge Family retained a special place in her heart, but she never felt the urge to dwell on what might have been if she had stayed. In her mind, leaving when she did allowed her to preserve the best memories of the series, the laughter of the early seasons, the thrill of the music, and the joy of connecting with fans. By stepping away on her own terms, she ensured those memories remained untarnished. In interviews, Shirley often shared advice for younger performers navigating the entertainment industry. Know your worth, protect your creative integrity, and never be afraid to walk away from something that no longer serves you. It was a philosophy she had lived by, guiding her through one of the toughest decisions of her career. Now at 91, she speaks with the clarity that only time can bring. She is proud of the legacy she built, not just as an actress, but as a woman who made choices that honored her own happiness. For Shirley Jones, life after the Partridge Family was not a quiet fade into the background. It was proof that endings are simply doorways to new beginnings, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is close a chapter before someone else writes the ending for you.